Hello, today is the 3rd of April 2023, and we'll talk about three architects. Well, one of them is an engineer, a brilliant engineer, the Einstein of structural engineer, as he was called. But we'll start with Douglas Darden, an architect who died in 1996 and was born in 1951. I do not have an extensive presentation about him. I will just show some drawings, some projects by him, and at the end I will read something from Wikipedia, which is, I think, relevant about his position in architecture. So Joseph Douglas Darden, born on October 20th, he actually died on April 3rd, 1996, and that's the reason we talk about him now, 27 years later. Was an American architectural designer, artist, writer, and instructor. He is most notable for his collection of visionary architecture published in his book Condemned Building in 1993. Darden died at the age of 44 in the spring of 1996 from leukemia. Very sad. So I will just show drawings and some projects that he did, and then at the end I will read something that will clarify a little bit his position in architecture, which is rather unusual. Also unusual is that he actually left behind him not buildings but projects and drawings. This was the man. This was Douglas in a romantic photograph, maybe inspired by French photographs of artists. Maybe the building itself is somewhere in France, maybe in Paris, or maybe not, maybe in the United States. But I like this picture very much. And as I said, I actually knew him. I met him in 1985 when we both participated in a competition launched by the Architectural League in New York. And we both won, and we presented our works in 15 minutes. Well, he took a longer time than 15 minutes. He presented his work just before me. And let's look at some of his drawings. His drawings are exquisite. They show what is called a narrative architecture. What is a narrative architecture? Narrative architecture is an architecture which speaks, which tells a story. Well, how many of our buildings do tell a story? Not too many, I would say. I recall what Gaston Bachelard said. He said the mollusk doesn't build in order to leave the house that he builds. It builds, but it lives in order to build the house. And it's a very important distinction between man and the mollusk. So the mollusk lives in order to build the house and not the other way around. We do the very opposite. We build the house as quickly as possible, or the building as quickly as possible, in order to move in as quickly as possible. But what if we change our understanding that maybe life, maybe the building should express a lived life? Thus, the building is at the end of the process of building, not at the beginning. Not at the beginning of life, but at the end, just as the mollusk does. You live in order to build the house. The mollusk lives in order to build the house. So the narrative architecture of Douglas Darden tries to evoke an architecture that tells a story, a lived life, a personalized life. I didn't study very carefully these drawings. I just created this PowerPoint presentation with his renderings, but they have nothing to do with commercial architecture. They are called visionary drawings. What he did is called a visionary architecture. What does that mean, visionary architecture? Well, I think any architecture that deserves its name should have, to an extent at least, something of what mysteriously is called visionary. You know, he explored ideas through drawing. He drew very well, as you can see, and this was done before the arrival of digitalization in architecture. So everything he drew was done manually. Now, of course, these kind of drawings are done, you know, like at Bartlett, many students, if not most of the students, explore architecture somehow in similar ways. But he did it with a total dedication, and you know, you would say it's rather strange that this kind of a poetical, almost surreal architecture was envisioned in a country which is considered to be very pragmatic, that is the United States of America. But the United States does have this aptitude sometimes to become very idealistic, being though that it is indeed very pragmatic. The position of Douglas Darden was confrontational, dialectical, and you'll understand very well when I read from Wikipedia what he wrote, what he thought. I am just showing quickly these drawings in order to stir you up, to stir up your imagination, to imagine a poetical architecture. Or maybe this is a redundancy, because any good architecture is poetical. Maybe not in an explicit way, but implicitly, good architecture is poetry. And Frank Lloyd Wright was correct. A great architect is a great poet. Not necessarily because writing poetry with words, although some architects did so, but being poetical through, you know, materials, through spaces, through the imaginative architectural work that you did. If the work is not poetical, if it doesn't express any aspiration for something that is not imposed by excessive pragmatism or materialistic concerns and functionalist obsessions and so on, then you have a chance to indeed create an architecture that is more memorable and which is moving, which is surprising. This is why I keep telling everybody, including myself, create surprises, surprise us. Don't show me the same old building that I see to the left and to the right. Create something unique. Otherwise, why would you do it? This is a self-portrait with a woman's breasts. Now, this is a commentary, so to speak. It's actually inspired by a famous drawing by Lequeux, who was considered in the 18th century a visionary architect, together with Ledoux and Boulez. But in the drawing of Lequeux, actually, it was the head of a nun, which Douglas Darden replaced with his own portrait, with his own face. Otherwise, what you see below is actually, almost identical with what Lequeux drew. Now you wonder what kind of architect, would make such a self-portrait. What did he want to say with this drawing? That he's actually a woman inside? That actually, because it's more than a reference. I mean, anyone who knows that drawing by Lequeux knows that this drawing was derived from Lequeux's provocative drawing. Does Douglas Darden try to tell us that he's actually a nun, or could have been, or he has some kind of spiritual longings? But then what about the sensuality of the breasts, exposed as they are? Questions, but he makes us think. And he provokes us. He's a provocateur. Here he is, I thought, and it might still be Michael Graves. I'm not sure, but looks a little bit like Michael Graves, the man on the left. The man on the right is Douglas Darden. Anyway, maybe it's not Michael Graves, but looks a little bit like Michael Graves. Other drawings by him. I rush a little bit because we have a lot of material to go through. We have two more other architects. Plus, I do want to discuss with you what Douglas Darden wrote and what he thought. So my question to you is an architecture which is rejecting the pressure coming from commercialism possible? I think it is possible, yes. If it's not possible to build it immediately, it is possible to draw it immediately. The important thing is to imagine it, to express it, to express whatever is inside yourself. Again, the provocative drawing of a self-portrait by Douglas Darden, but derived very explicitly from a drawing done by Lecoeur. Condemned building. This is a book he published, and from it I'm going to read a few things: plans, sections, elevations, details, models, ideograms, script texts, and letters for 10 allegorical works of architecture. Please do think, try to think about the possibilities of a allegorical architecture. So he published a book called Condemned Building. Here it is. You see the author, Douglas Darden, the title, Condemned Building. I didn't see the building, I didn't read it, but I show drawings that maybe could make you, guess why such a title of this book. He was an interesting man, an interesting architect, and I think we need unique voices, or as the saying goes now, singular unicities. I don't know if there is a plural of the word, unique. Singularly unique. Try to be singularly unique. Of course, it's a redundancy because what's unique is singular. But to amplify it is to underline the great need for something that is authentic, that is genuine, that is unique indeed. And now you are going to see him again in this. I don't know exactly what it is. It's a construction or some kind of a composite image combining drawing with the reality of a structure. I find it interesting, and I think again, this gives hope in the magic of architecture. And in the absence of the magic of architecture, what do we do? Well, we could continue to fool ourselves that we create architecture when in fact we have no joy in creating architecture. Frederick Kistler was right when he was showing the way towards a magical architecture. Let's create a magical architecture if we are not too scared of such a lofty goal. And now I want to read, if you allow me, this text from him about condemned buildings, because I think it's an important topic, the one he addresses. So I read from Wikipedia. In 1993, Douglas Darden published his only book entitled Condemned Building, an architect's pre-text, which exhibits 10 of his visionary architectural designs he had completed in prior years. These 10 designs explore an attempt to understand architecture as it is commonly comprehended, but done so by overturning and inverting common notions and canons and studying, as Darden would call it, architecture's underbelly. As is written in the forewords, the 10 works of architecture cited in this book were constructed from a particular canon of architecture that has persisted throughout the centuries and the varieties of architectural styles. The buildings are like a turning over one by one of those canons. Like the action of the plow, this was done not to lay waste to the canons, but to cultivate their fullest growth. So he goes on by saying the following are the project with their respective canon and reverse. Museum of Imposters. Architecture posits the authentic. He raises the word authentic and he writes architecture posits the fake. He continuously sabotages the expected meaning. Temple, forgetful. A monument is for remembering. A monument is for forgetting. Clinic for sleep disorders. Architecture domesticates our fears. He replaces it with architecture locates our fears. In other words, architecture expresses our fears. And I would agree that if architecture only tries to hide what is perhaps the deepest in us, it ends by being a lie. Night school, light is the revealer of form. Well, he says darkness is the revealer of form. Melville, well, a reference to Melville, the great North American writer. Architecture is the reconciliation with nature. He says architecture is the irreconciliation with nature. And this is actually what is happening if we are to be honest. Hostel, architecture takes possession of a place. He says architecture displaces. A saloon for Jesse James, architecture is accommodation. He says that actually architecture is confrontation, not accommodation. Sex shop, architecture fulfills desire. He raises the word fulfills and he says architecture objectifies desire. It's different. Confessional, man is at the center of divine creation. He says, no, man is off center of divine creation. And I would agree with him. It's an illusion that man is the measure of all things and at the center of divine creation. Thus, for instance, and the oxygen house, a house is for living. You know, he is confrontational towards Le Corbusier with his machine à habiter, the machine for living. He raises living and he says a house is for dying, it's not for living. Thus, for instance, in the project Oxygen House, the canon used is a house is for living. It's reversa. I never knew such a word existed, but I knew of reversal. Anyway, maybe there is. A house is for dying. This would most likely have come from Le Corbusier's infamous aphorism, a house is a machine for living in. Darden overturns this canon and designs a house for a dying man. A fictitious character he named Burden Abraham, who suffered a collapsed lung from a railroad accident and now must live in an oxygen tent for the rest of his life. The house would eventually become Abraham's tomb. Well, sadly, he himself died rather young. And this reminds me of what happened to Alexander Pushkin, the great Russian poet. In Dostoevsky's opinion, the greatest writer Russia had. I don't know if you know, but he wrote Onegin, writing where, someone dies in a duel with pistols because he provokes the one who was flirting with his wife, and he is killed in a forest in the duel. And exactly the same thing happens to Alexander Pushkin in real life 2 years later. It's unbelievable. Art preceded life. So again, we can do a building as quickly as possible to quickly move in, to have the great, quick, grand opening. The quicker, the better, no, efficient as we are, or you can live in order to build the house, and thus you build yourself. So the house becomes an expression of a lived life, your own life, in case you build, you know, a house for yourself, your own house. It's a subject that is complex, and I think we should talk about it later. Right now, I will start now talking about the second architect today, who is actually an engineer, a great engineer, and at the end we'll talk about a great one of the masters of the modern movement, Henry van der Velde. But for now, we'll talk about a formidable structural engineer born in Bangladesh and living and working in the United States, called Einstein of the structural engineer, Fazlur Rahman Khan, 1929-1982. He died rather young himself. So Fazlur Rahman Khan, born on April 3rd, and this is the reason we talk about him today, was a Bangladeshi American structural engineer and architect who initiated important structural systems for skyscrapers. Considered the father of tubular designs for high rises, Khan spelled differently than Louis Kahn. In the case of Louis Kahn, H is just prior to the letter N. Khan was also a pioneer in computer-aided design, CAD, but you see, he died in 1982. So he was very intuitive. He knew what the future was to be. He was the designer of the Sears Tower, since renamed Willis Tower, the tallest building in the world from 1973 until 1998, and the 100-story John Hancock Center. We are going to see both. A partner in the firm of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill in Chicago, Khan, more than any other individual, ushered in a renaissance in skyscraper construction during the second half of the 20th century. He has been called the Einstein of structural engineering and the greatest structural engineer of the 20th century for his innovative use of structural systems that remain fundamental to modern skyscraper design and construction. In his honor, the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat established the Fazlur Khan Lifetime Achievement Medal as one of the CTBUH, I don't know what that means, skyscraper awards. Although best known for skyscrapers, I'm sorry, Khan was also an active designer of other kinds of structures, including the Haji Airport Terminal, the McMath Pierce Solar Telescope, and will be the first building we are going to show, and several stadium structures. This was the man, a remarkable man, born in Bangladesh and arriving at the highest altitude in the field of structural engineering. On the left here, we see the Hancock Tower, the Hancock Center, John Hancock Center in Chicago, but we are going to see more in detail further on. Here we see him with the architect he collaborated many times, Dan Graham, both partners in the Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, very influential and large architecture firm in the United States, SOM. Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, with a model of the Hancock Tower. This is, he was immortalized in this way after his death. And then I discovered this text, which I'm going to read for you, both here and at the end of the short presentation, because I think it's important to essentialize his contribution to architecture. Khan invented a new way of building tall. So Fazlur Khan created the unconventional skyscraper, reversing the logic of the steel frame. And Douglas Darden was also reversing in his own way, not in terms of structure, but in terms of other things, what was given to us as immutable. So reversing the logic of the steel frame, Kant decided that the building's external envelope could, given enough trussing, framing, and bracing, be the structure itself. In other words, he didn't use any longer columns in the center of the plan, in the center of the structure, but he moved all the structure at the periphery. So the envelope of the building became structural. This made buildings even lighter. The bundled tube meant buildings no longer white tube, because the building became like a tube, literally like a tube, the whole skyscraper. The bundled tube meant buildings no longer need be box-like in appearance. They could become sculpture. Kant's amazing insight, he was name-checked by Obama, President Obama, in his Cairo University speech last year. Well, when this was written was some good years ago, changed both the economics and the morphology of super tall buildings. And it made Burj Khalifa, the famous very tall building built not too long ago, possible. Proportionately, Burj employs perhaps half the steel that conservatively supports the Empire State Building, a conventional skyscraper or a conventional structure. Burj Khalifa is the ultimate expression of his audacious, lightweight design philosophy. And look what this engineer said. The technical man must not be lost in his own technology. He must be able to appreciate life, and life is art, drama, music, and most importantly, people. Let's read again, because I'm afraid that many architects forget what this engineer didn't forget. The technical man must not be lost in his own technology. He must be able to appreciate life, and life is art. He began by saying life is art. He didn't say life is economics. He didn't say life is bureaucracy. He didn't even say life is engineering. He said life is art. Life is art, drama, music, and most importantly, people. Beautiful. Sometimes we need to listen to the engineers, because sometimes they are more humane and more poetical than we are, the architects. Because not too many architects, I'm afraid, would have the courage to say life is art, drama, music, and so on. Buildings on which Kant was structural engineer include, he built others, but I'll show some of them. This solar telescope, built in 1962, so, you know, more than 60 years ago, it's a remarkable building. I don't know who the architect was. He worked with an architect, but obviously for this kind of structure, the engineer was very important. I love diagonals. I even launched a diagonal festival in February, when it was the centennial of Claude Parron. Now we look at a building built by SOM and this formidable engineer. Have the courage to be unconventional. Have the courage to do reversals yourselves, like those proposed by Douglas Darden and like those materialized by this Bangladeshi architect. The architect and engineer, some apartments in Chicago, 1963, DeWitt Chestnut Apartments, a tall building, yes, very irregular, but I imagine that he was true to his, I don't know, I didn't see the plan. I'm not sure I have the plan here now. Maybe here he used a conventional structure or not, but the architecture is convincing, because it is honest as it is. You know, you might say it's nothing special about it, but sometimes what is not special becomes special exactly because it doesn't appear to be special sometimes. He built all these buildings. I mean, he was the structural engineer for these buildings. On the right is the John Hancock Tower, and the one in the middle we are going to see also a little later. And the one on the left is the one I just mentioned, this the with Chestnut Apartments in Chicago, 1963. Brunswick Building in Chicago, 1965. No pictures, unfortunately, I couldn't find. John Hancock Center. This is a famous, perhaps the most famous building whose structural engineer he was. I lived for 5 years in Chicago and I saw it. It's a dark building, you know. It could look haunting and ominous, but the structure is magnificent, you know, because again, it's a tube. All the structure is at the periphery of the tower. And yes, he needed these diagonals. He obviously loved the diagonals, but it's not just aesthetically, you know, its function is not really, is not even mainly about aesthetics. It's about the reinforcing the structural force of the periphery of the tower. It's a very famous tower. We already saw this picture. Now, you know, we look at these three gentlemen here. Who is the most modest? Is the engineer, not just because he's shorter than the others. But if you'd ask anyone, who is the architect here, you say, this is the architect. And maybe then this is the architect too. But this is the engineer. And he made this tower stand. Without these gentlemen, these two men would not have built this building, famous as it is. So the role of Mr. Kahn was immense. I don't know if you know, but Le Corbusier said, I love painters and engineers. I don't love architects. That's what Le Corbusier said. He loved painters and engineers, but not architects. And Frank Lloyd Wright didn't say something very different when he said, nothing wrong with architecture except the architects. But we need the engineers, obviously. You know, you could design an interesting building, but if it doesn't stand, if the engineer is not there to help you to work together with you, what do you do if you want to build it? So the Hancock Tower, the John Hancock Tower, is a great building, one of the greatest Chicago has, and continues to be one of the greatest skyscrapers in this world. Of course, others, taller and taller, came into being, but this building will continue to provoke emotions, dark as it is, with its structural diagonals that this engineer architect born in Bangladesh made possible. Bravo to him. And this is a picture, you know, from around that time. Look at it. Look at this, architectural marvel going to the sky with buildings around it much smaller. In the proximity, not far away from Lake Michigan. When I downloaded the pictures, this is what first came because it was a higher resolution picture. And I left it like this because I like it. It's almost like a painting by Mark Rothko. But what do we see here? You know, we see the sea and the lake, Lake Michigan, and the sky. The sea and the sky, the lake and the sky, water and well, there are no clouds, the sky. And it's a fragment of this picture. And John Hancock Tower. So you have the power of human creativity, you have the lake, and you have the sky. And then you have some other buildings around, but the John Hancock Tower is still amazingly present. It has presence. And it would not have had this presence if this engineer didn't do his work. I keep telling everybody, including myself, we need engineers who are as creative as the architects. I'm not trying to say that architects are more creative than engineers, but they both need to be creative. And if they are both creative, they collaborate well and they do amazing things. Like this tower, the John Hancock Tower. And here it is seen from the beach at the edge of Lake Michigan. I used to bike, not too often, but a few times I did. I biked all the way from Evanston to here, actually, seeing from far away the skyline of Chicago. And in this skyline, the John Hancock Tower stands tall indeed. Chicago. Constructors, Man of the Year, Fazlur R. Khan. He was called the Man of the Year. Born in Bangladesh. Bravo to him. And I read that he, in his free time, he would recite poems by Tagore, Rabindranath. I can't pronounce the first name of this great Indian poet. I'm sorry, Tagore. So a very special engineer. I mean, what else can we say about an engineer who created the first equation, life is art? One Shell Square, New Orleans, Louisiana, 1972. Another building that is, I think is very good, even if it's not, Frank Gehry building, it's not, provoking us with unbelievable aesthetical, statements, but I admire its simplicity, its rigor. 140 William Street in Melbourne, in Australia, 1972. We see again the same structural principle to create the skyscraper like a tube, where all the structure is at the periphery of the building. Melbourne. And this is the plan. Well, I see there for columns, but for this large building, I don't know how big is the side of the square, but it's probably very large. So to have just 4 columns, the center, it's very little for such an ample building. A very pure plan and a very pure elevation or model. Now Sears Tower, which was the tallest building in the world for about 20 years, renamed Willis Tower, but initially was built by that company Sears, and that's why it was called the Sears Tower. Here it is, dark again, very, very tall. Chicago. We see here the 2 creations of, there was also an architect. He didn't work alone, but he had a major role. The Hancock Tower, shorter than the Sears Tower, but both 2 of the most emblematic buildings in Chicago. Sears Tower. Many of these buildings are quite impressive, but I do have to tell you what I felt when I looked from far away at the skyline of Chicago near my bike. It impressed me, yes, the skyline, and it's less commercial than the one in New York City. In Chicago, you don't see too many banners, you just see architecture in general, you just see the buildings. But I did have the feeling that most of these buildings were actually built not necessarily for the glory of architecture, not necessarily for the idealism of building, incredibly well and beautiful buildings, but for profit. I truly felt that the engine behind all this, yes, great effort, was actually money. You know, the money. And of course, in order to build, we need money. But if the goal is to create even more money, then I think the raison d'etre of the building is not as lofty as perhaps should be. But maybe I'm naive. Maybe those who with pragmatic, you know, dispositions see better. I don't know. But it did disappoint me a little bit that the greatness of the skyline of Chicago, and it is great, somewhere, somehow, behind all of it, I felt that it's capitalistic at its core, and this disappointed me a little bit. Anyway, but the achievement of the engineer, if we do not think in ideological terms, is amazing indeed. And I don't know if this was photoshopped or not, or maybe it was some kind of firework in order to emphasize a celebration of the tower. It's spectacular, maybe too spectacular. Sears Tower. Now, first Wisconsin Center. We are approaching the end of this short presentation. He deserves a better presentation, but renamed US Bank Center in Milwaukee, 1973. Now we see a different work done by this engineer. In the Arab world, this airport, which was highly publicized, 1974, 1980. And it's not a skyscraper, of course, but it shows his capability, his capacity to create an innovative structure, even if it was not his, you know, tubular skyscraper. The culture of the tent is, of course, very important in the Arab world. And so here is a modern interpretation of the tent. SOM, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, the large firm for which he worked, and he was a partner, he became a partner in that firm, has very large commissions all over the world. And it might be that it's still the biggest architecture office in the world, or certainly one of the biggest. They also have a very generous fellowship program. So if you have high ambitions in architecture, please do apply. For young architects or even students, they offer a traveling fellowship that is very, very generous. I'm talking about the SOM Architecture Fellowship, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, where this brilliant engineer worked. When an engineer is also a poet, we get the best. When an architect is also a poet, we get the best. And when we have an engineer plus an architect, or an architect plus an engineer, both poets at heart, we get the best buildings. Now this one, I couldn't find pictures, also in the Arab world. This is a Metrodome, it's a stadium in Minneapolis, Minnesota, 1982. I wish I knew more about structures and technicalities, so to be able to say something worthy of being said. But I don't know enough, so I better abstain. A covered stadium. Now, of course, we can make the sketch, you know, of something like this, but you consider the dimensions, and to make this thing work. I mean, structurally stand is not easy, as you can imagine. So that's why a very capable engineer is very, very, very important. One Magnificent Mile, Chicago, completed in 1983. It's a, you know, you can see the architecture changed from the architecture of Hancock Tower and the Sears Tower. They are massive. Yes, it's a massive architecture. It's like a vertical fortress, but you feel the influence of what was called postmodernism. It's a good architecture. I'm not so sure about what's going on here, you know, but these two towers still have a, you know, seriousness and austerity, even, which I appreciate and I admire. But these historicist things at the top, if indeed this was built also by SOM, I hope it was not, they turn me off. What is this? In Chicago, another tower. We saw a picture of it at the very beginning, and we see here again these diagonals that you know, are necessary structurally, but they are also positive in terms of aesthetics. Let's remember that he used a different conception about how the structure could be for tall buildings, to move the structure, if not totally, but in good measure, at the periphery of the building. Also, it's worth mentioning, I think, is that structure could also become at least partially ornamental. So you have the simultaneity between structure and ornament, like these diagonals could be also perceived as being ornamental, although they serve a structural function. So you have both structure and ornament, as it should be. Okay, and I end this imperfect and rather short presentation on this brilliant engineer by reading again, if you allow me, the text that I read at the beginning, just to crystallize for us a few thoughts about him. Khan invented a new way of building tall. So Fazlur Khan created the unconventional skyscraper. Reversing the logic of the steel frame, he decided that the building's external envelope could, given enough trussing, framing, and bracing, be the structure itself. So the envelope becomes the structure. This made buildings even lighter. The bundled tube meant buildings no longer need the box-like in appearance. They could become sculptured or sculptural. Khan's amazing insight, he was name-checked anyway by Obama in his Cairo University, changed both the economics and the morphology of super tall buildings. And later on, other buildings were, in fact, now his invention is used for you know, most skyscrapers that are being built. So he literally revolutionized the conception about structure in the case of tall buildings. So now we'll talk about the last, just a second, because I don't know what's going on here, why I can't exit. About the third architect we'll talk today, also connected with the day of April 3rd, a very important architect in the modernist movement, and that is Henry van der Velde. 1863-1957. So Henry Clemens van der Velde was a Belgian painter But there you see, but then, you know, between the Dutch and Belgian, you know, you could pronounce in French, but you are given here. So the Dutch pronunciation was a Belgian painter, architect, interior designer, and art theorist. He actually studied only painting. He didn't study architecture. Together with Victor Horta and Paul Hankar, he is considered one of the founders of Art Nouveau in Belgium. He worked in Paris with Samuel being the founder of the first gallery of Art Nouveau in Paris. Van der Velde spent the most important part of his career in Germany and became a major figure in the German Jugendstil, which is also Art Nouveau. He had a decisive influence on German architecture and design at the beginning of the 20th century. This was the man, a very interesting man, painter, theorist, and architect. I don't think he was a Homo economicus. Here he is in his studio, very elegant, as architects sometimes are, with the exception, of course, of the Pritzker Prize winner, Renzo Piano, the worst dressed architect ever. But then not worse dressed than Pablo Picasso. Did you ever see how Pablo Picasso was dressed? Unbelievably without taste. I mean, it's incomprehensible how a painter, forget the magnitude of Pablo Picasso, he was dressed horribly. You know, I read that actually Pablo Picasso received you know, high-end clothing from the greatest designers who wanted to advertise themselves through having the great painter wear whatever they sent him, and Picasso would just throw those clothing on him without any kind of color coordination or materials or unbelievable. Just check please on Google Images. You will see Picasso dressed in the worst possible way. I can't understand how a painter, an excellent painter, the Einstein of painting, could dress himself like this. But this is not the case with Henry van der Velde. You see here, this man knew how to dress, obviously. Anyway, a serious man, this Belgian, very serious. Not too many employees in his office, as you can see, but or maybe they left earlier. Drawings by Van der Velde. I love what he says here. A line is a force. Beautifully put, a line is a force. Let's think about this. A line is a force. Although Louis Kahn used to think that the first line on a white piece of paper is already less than the whiteness of the paper without any line on it. But I would agree with Henri van der Velde. I also agree with Louis Kahn. But a line is a force. If we understand this, when we trace a line, that we do it digitally or manually and invest it with that force that Henri van der Velde felt that a line has, then we might do good things in architecture and graphic arts and painting and furniture design or whatever, even in life. Proposal for a Nietzsche memorial. The ever fascinating philosopher, the one who philosophized with a hammer. This is the proposal by Henry van der Velde for a mausoleum, for a memorial for Friedrich Nietzsche. He designed also a library in or archive. I don't know exactly. Well, I think I have images with it for Nietzsche. This man is self-taught, was self-taught in architecture. He was very influenced by Vincent van Gogh. He loved Vincent van Gogh, and unfortunately, I mean, I don't know, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know what to say. He understood that he couldn't paint like the incandescent Vincent van Gogh, and he started to do architecture. But he did paint. He did continue to paint. And we are going to see at the end of the presentation some paintings inspired, some paintings by Henry van der Velde inspired by Vincent van Gogh. The closest, well, no, I shouldn't use big words, but I truly think Vincent van Gogh was, no, I shouldn't say so. But what I felt like saying, no, I shouldn't say it. I stopped. Sorry about this. But I am highly infatuated with Vincent van Gogh. It's true. Architecture by Henry van der Velde, Blumenwerf. First private residence in Belgium, 1895, 1896. Here it is. Not bad. I mean, you know, it's not explicitly modern, but it is modern. It announces modernity. And he was considered an eclectic architect. And yes, he has what we call elements of eclecticism, but everything is controlled. Everything is, I mean, coming together, so to speak. Tradition and innovation. An interesting building, 1895. Around that time, Mercedes built its the first vehicle for you know, personal quicker movement. The arrival of the car in the world was a major event, and we are still very much affected by it. I think it was created in 1897 by Mr. Benz. I don't know much about cars, but I remember reading something like this. Anyway, this is the house built in Belgium, 1895 by Henry van der Velde. We are also going to see the first building in Weimar where the Bauhaus was before Walter Gropius built his well-known modernistic structures in Dessau. Here he is again, still alone. An open window, a statue. I think we need more architects, artists than more architects, businessmen, or you know, accountants or whatever. It's easy to idealize the past. Of course, there were problems then as there are problems now. In fact, in 1914, not much later from this time, you know, when he built this building, a huge theater that he built in Köln, in Cologne, was demolished because the First World War started in 1914, a few months after it was built. I hope I have a picture of it here. Now, is this a kitchen? It looks like a kitchen, but I don't know. It's different at the same time. You know, it has you know, kind of a sofa or some kind of a bed, and then the man has a book in front of him or a notebook, and he's still dressed elegantly and looks serious. But I think it's the kitchen. But you know, it's a different kind of kitchen. And I really think it's time to bring back a bed or something, yes, to lay down on in the kitchen. It's very, very pleasant to lay on something, you know, more or less comfortable bed in the kitchen while someone dear to you cooks something on the stove. I have very nice memories since I was a child in my grandmother's house. She had a bed in the kitchen, and I enjoyed being in that bed while she cooked something. Interior decoration of Siegfried Bink's art gallery. We read that he was associated with this gentleman, the Maison de l'Art Nouveau. You know, he could be perceived as an architect who worked within the you know, but I shouldn't say the limits, within the framework of Jugendstil or Art Nouveau himself, Henry van der Velde. So he did the interior for this, the interior decoration. Yes, decoration. Architects do sometimes ornaments and decorations. There is a difference between a decoration and an ornament. So the Franco-German art dealer and publisher Siegfried Bing played a key role in publicizing the style, Art Nouveau. Bing opened a new gallery at 22 Rue de Provence in Paris, the Maison de l'Art Nouveau, devoted to new works in both the fine and decorative arts. The interior and furniture of the gallery were designed by the Belgian architect Henry van der Velde, who never studied architecture, one of the pioneers of Art Nouveau architecture. Now, interior of the Folkwang Museum in Hagen in Germany, no pictures, another villa, an extension, and we see here how hybrid he was. You know, it's a building that doesn't have a precise style. It's not easy to pin down, but I think this is a quality. I also like the chromatics, almost opposite colors, almost. It looks better in colors. He was a force, Henry van der Velde, he was. And his lines were forces too, as he himself said and wanted. Extension and interior decoration of the Nietzsche archive in Weimar. I mentioned this in 1903. He did the interior, well, the interior design of the Nietzsche archive in Weimar. Here it is. I wonder what the philosopher with a hammer would have said, because this is a very cushioned, you know, interior, very soft and comfortable and civilized. But then why should one suffer when one studies the archive of, or in the archive of Friedrich Nietzsche? There is even a concert piano there. Now, what does this have to do with Zarathustra? Not much, actually. Nice door handles, very nice creations by Henry van der Velde. The Bauhaus University Weimar, again, this is the building where the first Bauhaus was located. In 1919, the building was made by Henry van der Velde. Only in 1926, I think, or 1924, maybe 1926, Gropius built the complex of buildings in Dessau. But until then, that's where the Bauhaus were located, in a building by Henry van der Velde. And this is the building today. That's how it looks like. And I'm not sure, I mean, with all due respect for Walter Gropius, I'm not sure that the buildings, the newer buildings, are better than this one. Maybe it's my regressive side, but I kind of like more this one. And I imagine those ateliers, those studios with a lot of glass are, you know, perfect places to do art, to study art. And to arrive at that exaltation that the manifesto by Walter Gropius exalted. Because he said, as you remember, the only difference between the craftsman and the artist is that the artist is an exalted craftsman or craftsperson. Henry van der Velde, Weimar, Germany, the building where the Bauhaus started. Well, in the later buildings, we wouldn't see ornaments, but Henry van der Velde did use them, as you can see them. And strangely, perhaps the ornament is coming back. The clubhouse of the Chemnitzer Lawn Tennis Club, demolished. Too bad it was demolished. Humans are strange. They demolish after they build, even after they build well. Sometimes they demolish in order to create so-called parking lots, like in the case of the the great Buffalo building by Frank Lloyd Wright, the Larkin building, one of the greatest buildings by Frank Lloyd Wright was demolished in order to make room for a parking lot, if you can believe it. I only hope that in this case it was not a parking lot that replaced this good building, and it was a good building. What a shame. What is this? In Germany, another villa, quite ample and hybrid, complex, with without a decided style, but that's good actually. Somewhere between the past and the present, somewhere between the past and, should we call it the future? We don't know. He employed organic materials, stones, ceramic tiles, but the building is grayish, maybe, refurbished in this way. I don't know. One day, maybe the works of Henry van der Velde will be, studied with more attention, starting with me, because I have a feeling there is something to learn from this man. Maybe his architecture is not easy, but because you cannot truly say that it belongs to what we call tradition. At the same time, you cannot truly say that it truly belongs to what we call modernity. It's somewhere in between. Yeah, maybe his architecture is another example of in-betweenness, sometimes uncomfortable. The private residence of Henry van der Velde, Weimar in Germany, a little bit confused. This looks a little bit different from. Well, he was doing well if indeed this was his own house. Yeah, it looks like it, but I don't know if it was built from the beginning for himself. I keep saying, when the ivy, climbs on the building, any building, even if the building is not brilliant architecturally speaking, the ivy takes care of it, and the building becomes at least acceptable. That's why I keep telling the students, if the facades of your building do not come out well for some reason, don't worry, just use ivy and they will take care of the building. Like here, I mean, the ivy makes any building, pleasant, and also the level of ozone is increased. Now, very cushioned bourgeois interiors, you wouldn't expect from a lover of Vincent van Gogh such an interior, but he was a man of contradictions, of divergent tendencies, Henry van der Velde. A certain level of lack of decision existed even in Magritte, no, in a way. If we think about les mots et les images, the tension between the words and the images that could puzzle you and could throw you into a Hamletian crisis. A memorial for Ernst in Vienna, I don't know, collaboration. It's a memorial indeed. We remember the memorial he designed for Nietzsche, but this was built for whom? I don't know who that person is. Anyway, he worked with two sculptors. We could reverse what Douglas Darden said, that if a house is not to live in, but it is a house is the place where to die, then you could reverse and say a mausoleum is a place, is a building not to die in, or it's not the building for the dead, but it's a building for the living. Now it doesn't work, but it could work. I don't know if we think about Heraclitus. Heraclitus had very strange ideas. He said that what we call actually life is death, and what we call actually death is life. Strange, no? What if he was right? What if at this very moment when I talk to you, I'm actually dead, not alive? No, it sounds too morbid. It's too, no, it's too bizarre. I shouldn't say so. But this is the mausoleum, serving death. But maybe through some kind of a reversal, you could say it actually serves and amplifies, intensifies life. I mean, after all, between this building and this building, which one says a bigger yes to life? This one, which was built for life, or this one, which was built for death? I'm not sure. I almost feel like saying this one is saying a bigger yes to life, although it was built for death. But yes, the architect was a good architect. Henry van der Velde. Palace for Graf Durkheim in Weimar. It's not a palace. It's like a palace, another opulent villa. But we see here the same contorted hybridity and eclecticism, and yet everything comes together. It's not disintegrating under our eyes. No, it is convincing, but you see it's a conglomerate of various tendencies. Interesting work. This is the theater that I said before, that it was destroyed a few months after it was built in Cologne, in Köln, in Germany. Was built for an world exhibition, 1913, 1914, and after a few months of being part of the expo, it was destroyed because the First World War started, and this was the building. There was another building, a very important building by Walter Gropius, since I mentioned him, built on the grounds of the same expo. Together with Adolf Meyer, they built an excellent building, which was also demolished. And maybe beyond them, the beautiful glass pavilion of Bruno Taut, also demolished. A tragedy. So this is the building by Henry van der Velde that does not exist, thanks to the wisdom of Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens demolished it a few months after the opening of the great exhibition in Köln. Now you wonder, how come this man, never trained as an architect, received so many commissions and had a chance to build? He was a painter. Perfectly symmetrical plan. But the building is not so passe, so to speak. its architecture, look at the rounded corners, and it has a simplicity which we connect with modernity. Another villa, 1913, 1914. This one, but I wouldn't say it's inferior to some buildings from the early phase in the works of Frank Lloyd Wright. Yes, he didn't emphasize the horizontal window. You see, he still uses vertical windows, but the massing is good. The volumes are convincing. It's a building which is not alarmingly innovative, but is not alarmingly lacking innovation. Another building by Henry van der Velde, where what we call the past, maybe that past which doesn't pass, cohabits with his present and maybe with what followed. Ornament again, symmetry, some sittings, some armchairs by none other than Le Corbusier, but I'm sure he brought them. Not, it wasn't him who brought them in, but those who used. Or are they maybe influenced by Le Corbusier? They don't quite seem to be by Le Corbusier. Anyway, modernity is at home in a quasi-modern building. Another villa. He loved rooms in the attic, as you can see. It's hard to believe that all of them are chambre de bonne. I don't think this house had so many servants. Maybe students, poor students, and some maids, all living in the attic. As myself, I lived once in Paris like this. La Nouvelle Maison, Van der Velde's private residence in Belgium. This is changed. Now we remember we saw another house he built for himself. All of a sudden, we have to take our hat off for modernity. Moderate modernity. What was the year? 1927, 1928, exactly at the time Le Corbusier was building Villa Savoie. Brick, as opposed to the white Villa Savoie, with some little deviant gestures, which I like actually, bringing in some ambiguity. So this was built by Henry van der Velde for himself. It's a moderate architecture in a way, but also unsettling a little bit. It's hard to name, it's hard to describe, it's hard to analyze. And here is the charm of Henry van der Velde, actually. Sometimes maybe a little bit an infuriating charm. Because you almost pass by it saying this is not an exceptional building. But it depends what you mean by exceptional. You could pass by it without maybe even noticing it or turning your head. Here is a stamp with the architect and with his own house behind him. So it became famous now. Home for the Elderly in Hanover, in Germany, 1929, 1931. I love brick, so anything built with brick receives my affection. The exposed brick, of course. Brick should always be exposed. Don't cover it, don't hide it. You cannot hide the beauty of brick, even if by hiding it you protect it. No, it's better to expose it, to show its truth. That's how bricks are nice, to show their earthiness. Great architects never hit bricks, no. Look at these, little details, so to speak. They are meaningful and they are delicious almost, and the brick allows you to do such things and many other things, as the School of Amsterdam knew quite well with Michel de Klerk and others around him. A polyclinic, 1933, 1935. Wow. All of a sudden, a white building from Henry van der Velde. Maybe it was built like this. Maybe it was built actually with bricks and then covered. So contradicting what I just said. But we see fragments of, walls or fences done with the bricks exposed. But the building is white. This architect refuses to be boxed into a style. He's taking us by surprise. Or maybe whiteness is connected with the function of the building. It's a clinic. It's a mini hospital. It's a place where you go to be comforted by the whiteness of Apollo and serenity and harmony, and thus to feel better. But even here, he has his beloved brick shown as the brick deserves to be shown. And the trees are beautiful. Now, the Library of Ghent University in Ghent, Belgium, 1933, 1938, the Tower of Books. We are going to see indeed a tower of books, and the books do need a tower in the sense that they are towering in the name of the knowledge. Here it is. Usually the towers are office buildings, mercantile structures, mercantile buildings, but to have a tower of books dedicated to books is not a common occurrence. It dominates Ghent. We are going to see it together with the cathedral. The top level. Now, does knowledge need to be so emphatic? I don't know. It depends. If you want to be polemical towards the praxis of everything around it, then yes. Why not? The Tower of Books. The phallic attributes of knowledge. Although I think knowledge should not be imposing through force. But look at the silhouette look at the skyline of Ghent. We see some old buildings, mainly churches, and then the modernistic Tower of Books by Henry van der Velde and scaffoldings. A very interesting ground floor for this tower. Here it is. Whatever Wolf Prix might say that he hates columns, I like these columns by Henry van der Velde on the ground floor of his Tower of Books. And they are covered with ceramic tiles, thus reinforcing the connection with the earth. Technical school, 1936, 1942, with the exception of the windows as they are, you would say, well, it's a cubistic, rather banal building. I don't know exactly if this building probably was done later. Maybe this was done by Henry van der Velde. We are entering now into a new phase in his works. The Belgian pavilion at the 1937 Paris exposition, Here it is, and we see Tour Eiffel behind. A train station, 1937. Belgian building for the 1939 New York World's Fair. Here it is. This man built a lot. This painter. Bells for Peace. Bells for Peace, we are going to see just a second. Yes, I think that here there was some, I forgot exactly what it was. It was, I think, connected with colonialism and, you know, the taking over of, you know, Congo by Belgium. And, you know, there was some message having political connotations. This is a detail of the building. The building does not exist any longer. So this was built in 1939 at the World Expo in New York. Furniture. With this, we end this a little bit rushed presentation of Henry van der Velde. He designed a lot of furniture too. We are going to see also some of his artworks, the paintings, but the furniture is excellent, I would say. With sinuous lines, lines of force, sinuous lines, the lines of Art Nouveau, the Jugendstil, built very well by craftsmen who might not have been exalted, but he was exalted, the artist. Paintings. And with this, we end the presentation. As I said, he was very influenced by Vincent van Gogh, but his painting is different from the great Dutch painter. Some influences maybe also from Signac or Seurat, pointillism. You see, you can tell that he didn't quite make up his mind in painting, maybe even more explicitly than in his built work. The important thing is that he expressed artistically as fully as possible. He loved art. And we remember what the great engineer Kant said, life is art. Let's never forget this. Art is not, life is not economics, is not accounting, is not money, is art. I know I can be accused of being naive, but I prefer to be naive with a heart than to be so-called wise without a heart. Let's not be accountants, let's not be bureaucrats, let's not be, money speculators. Let's be artists. We architects, we need to be artists, otherwise life becomes unbearable, not just for ourselves, for everybody around us. Here we see clearly it's almost a copy, reenactment of an artwork by Vincent van Gogh, The Sower. Let's all be sowers. Let's plant seeds, the seeds of creativity in the soil of our minds, hearts, and very, very carefully in the soil of the earth, because we don't want to pollute this earth any longer. Thank you.